On the outskirts of a small English village, where frost-silvered fields stretched into the quiet distance and cottages glowed with gentle amber light, there lived a man named Gabriel Grub. He was the village sexton, a keeper of graves and guardian of the churchyard, a man whose days were filled with digging, tending, repairing, and perhaps, more than anything, complaining. Gabriel was known by every villager, not because he was friendly or sociable, but because he was the very opposite. He wore his bitterness like a winter cloak, heavy and dark, wrapped tightly around him to shield him from even the faintest warmth of the world. His back was crooked from years of digging, his beard coarse and tangled, and his eyes sharp and suspicious, as if happiness itself were a thief he must always keep at bay. Children whispered that he had been born scowling. Adults said he disliked the sun for rising and the moon for shining. But the truth was simpler. Gabriel feared joy. He feared its softness, its vulnerability, its tendency to slip through fingers and leave aching emptiness behind. So instead, he embraced hardness, hard soil, hard frost, hard words. And now it was Christmas Eve, a night that filled the village with a warmth so sweet it felt almost like magic. In the cozy houses lining the snow-covered lane, candles flickered in windows, wreaths hung fresh and green upon wooden doors, and families gathered around crackling fires. Laughter drifted into the streets through the cracks in shutters. Someone sang a carol softly, just a few measures, just enough to suggest hope. Gabriel despised it. As he trudged through the snow-dusted village square, the cool air nipped at his nose and seeped through the seams of his coat. He carried with him a lantern and a spade, for he had decided, quite proudly, that Christmas Eve was an excellent night for grave digging. While others feasted and made merry, Gabriel would work. He told himself he did it because he valued duty, but deep down he enjoyed the idea of being the lone figure in the darkness while others celebrated. He walked with stiff, purposeful steps, boots crunching through thin ice on the path. The villagers greeted one another with warmth, but when they saw Gabriel, they quieted, stepping aside with awkward politeness, unsure whether to nod or ignore him entirely. A pair of children ran past him, chasing each other through the snow. Their cheeks were rosy from the cold, and their laughter rang like tiny bells. Gabriel frowned. "Off with you," he growled, waving his free hand. No need to shout loud enough to wake the dead. The children giggled and darted away, unbothered. "That's right," he muttered after them. "Run along, spreading cheer everywhere like a sickness." He continued down the road, passing the warm window of a bakery. Inside, a baker placed freshly baked rolls into baskets, while his family decorated a small fir tree. The scent of cinnamon and warm bread drifted outside, gentle as a memory. Gabriel sniffed the air and scowled deeper. "Disgraceful," he grumbled. "All that sweetness makes a man's stomach churn." He pressed on. Further ahead, at the edge of the square, an elderly woman struggled to carry a heavy bundle of firewood through the snow. She paused, leaning forward to catch her breath. Gabriel walked right past her. "Evening, Mr. Grub," she panted. "Cold night, isn't it?" He grumbled something unintelligible and did not slow his pace. As he passed, a single log slipped from her bundle and rolled toward him. It tapped against his boot. "Would you be so kind as to—" "No," Gabriel replied sharply, refusing even to look at her. He stepped over the log and continued toward the churchyard gate. Behind him, the old woman sighed. But she did not curse him. She only whispered, as villagers often did on nights when Gabriel Grub passed by. Poor soul. And that was the strangest thing of all. Though Gabriel was gruff, unkind and harsh, people did not truly hate him. They pitied him. There was something in his hunched posture and bleak expression that suggested not malice, but loneliness, deep-rooted and long ignored. But Gabriel refused to acknowledge such things. He preferred the company of gravestones to human beings. The dead made no demands, no cheer, no foolish talk of hope or joy. They were still, quiet. And to Gabriel, that stillness felt like peace. The churchyard lay ahead, its iron gate rimed with frost. Snow rested softly atop the old tombstones, smoothing their sharp edges, making the place appear gentler than usual, almost serene. Even Gabriel paused a moment at the sight. Snow muffled the world's noise, giving everything a slow, dreamlike quality. The distant hum of celebration faded behind him. The sexton let out a breath, watching it curl into a ghostly cloud. Then, with grim satisfaction, he pushed open the gate. It creaked loudly, protesting the cold. Inside, the air was colder still, and quieter. This, Gabriel thought, was where he truly belonged. But as he crossed the yard, his lantern casting a warm circle of light on the uneven path, he noticed something unusual. Near the far boundary of the graveyard, where the oldest stones leaned and crumbled, where vines crept like dark fingers across marble, he saw footprints, small ones, many of them, almost as if a group of children had danced through the snow. Gabriel frowned. Imps, he muttered, vandals, up to no good. He bent down, inspecting the prints. They were indeed small, but oddly shaped. The toes were sharp, the heels narrow, and the stride peculiar. Not children's footprints. Not any human footprints. Gabriel straightened slowly, a chill creeping through him, independent of the cold. Humph, he said to himself, probably just an animal. But he did not sound convinced. Shaking off the feeling, he set down his lantern beside a partly dug grave. He gripped his spade, testing its weight. The soil was frozen at the surface, but he welcomed the challenge. Hard work kept the mind busy. Hard work kept unwanted thoughts at bay. He jabbed the spade into the earth. The sound echoed strangely in the stillness, sharp, metallic, almost watched. Again he jabbed, again that echo. Gabriel paused, gripping the handle more tightly. He looked around. The snow-covered gravestones stared back in silent rows. The trees rustled faintly, though the wind had died. In the distance, the village bells rang a pleasant, cheerful melody, drifting over the hill like a warm breath. Gabriel shuddered, irritated by the comfort of the sound. He threw himself into his digging, but the feeling lingered, a sense of being observed, of being measured. Somewhere between the scrape of iron against frozen soil and the soft fall of snowflakes, a whisper, thin as silk, slid through the shadows. Gabriel froze. It might have been the wind, or imagination, or something else entirely. He leaned on his spade, listening. Silence. Then, just as he was about to dismiss it, another whisper, clearer this time, like a giggle, or a mocking sigh. Gabriel straightened slowly, heart thudding once in his chest. Humph, he muttered. Nonsense, just nonsense. And yet, he did not feel alone. Above him, the clouds shifted across the moon, casting long, crooked shadows across the gravestones. The shadows seemed to move, and somewhere deep in the earth beneath his feet, a sound, so faint he could not be sure he heard it, hinted that this Christmas Eve would not be like any other. Not for Gabriel Grub, not for the Sexton who tried so hard not to feel. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Snow. For a long moment, Gabriel Grub stood motionless in the quiet graveyard, his gloved hand resting on the handle of the spade, his breath curling upward in a pale ghost of mist. Nothing stirred, nothing changed, and yet the strange sense of being watched clung to him like frost on glass. He told himself, firmly, stubbornly, almost angrily, that he was imagining things. "It's the cold," he muttered, "makes the mind jumpy." That's all. But something inside him whispered otherwise, something old, something cautious, something he had spent years ignoring. He shrugged it off and returned to his work. The lantern's warm glow bobbed gently beside him as he drove the spade into the frozen earth. The soil resisted him, brittle on top, damp and dark beneath. Each strike rang with a metallic thud, echoing through the yard like a heartbeat. Still, every so often, Gabriel paused and glanced over his shoulder. Nothing, just gravestones softened by snow, their inscriptions half hidden beneath winter's silent touch. Still, he felt it, the presence, not human, not animal, something lighter, quicker, watching with gleaming amusement. "Bah," Gabriel growled, slamming the spade into the earth again. "If anyone's watching, it's to see a fool freeze to death for working on Christmas Eve." He dug for several minutes, his movements rhythmic, almost meditative. The clouds drifted across the pale moon. Snow fell in slow, gentle flakes that caught the lantern light and glimmered like drifting embers. Then, a soft, deliberate tap sounded behind him. Gabriel stopped mid-motion. Another tap, and then a third, tiny, faint but unmistakably intentional, like the click of a small boot on stone. He turned sharply. Nothing. No figure stood among the gravestones. No animal scurried between the monuments. The snow lay smooth and untouched, except for the old, odd footprints he had seen earlier. Gabriel squinted into the darkness. "Show yourself," he barked. His voice bounced off the stones and faded into the trees. A moment passed, 2, 3. Then, a laugh, a small, sharp, wicked laugh, like the tinkle of broken glass. Gabriel's heart lurched. He spun toward the sound, but once again there was no one. The laugh came again, behind him this time. He whirled around so fast that his foot slipped on the snow, sending him stumbling. His lantern rocked wildly, casting wild arcs of light over the stones. His breath came faster now, puffing clouds of panic into the night. "Who's there?" he demanded, voice cracking. Another tiny laugh, another, and another, until a chorus of small, eerie giggles filled the air, swirling around him like leaves in a winter storm. Gabriel's skin prickled beneath his coat. His beard trembled. For the first time in many years, perhaps the first time in his life, fear, real fear, stirred inside him. He clutched his spade like a weapon. "Come out," he cried. "Enough of this nonsense." A voice answered him at last, a thin, high-pitched voice, smooth and sly, sounding as though it floated on a cold breeze. "Oh, but Gabriel," it whispered, "we've been out all along." Gabriel's eyes widened. He pivoted toward the largest yew tree in the corner of the graveyard, for the voice seemed to come from its shadow. The lantern light trembled across the trunk, and a shape stepped forward, small, crooked, grinning. A creature no taller than a child, with long pointed ears, a nose sharp as a quill, and eyes that gleamed like polished stones. Its arms were thin, its fingers bony. It wore a ragged vest and breeches that looked stitched together from dried leaves and strips of old bark. Snow clung to its wild hair like tiny diamonds. Gabriel's voice stuck in his throat. The creature bowed with a flourish. "A pleasant Christmas Eve to you, Mr. Grub." Gabriel took a step back. "What? What are you?" The creature laughed, and the sound rippled through the night like a mischievous wind. "What am I? Why, I am a goblin, of course." It tapped its chest with pride, and not the only one. As if these words were a signal, shadows shifted between the gravestones. One, another, then another. Small figures emerged, hopping onto tombstones, crouching on marble slabs, peering from behind stone crosses. Their eyes glowed, their teeth flashed in wicked grins. Dozens of goblins, each stranger and more crooked than the last, surrounded the sexton with silent, delighted anticipation. Gabriel's legs nearly buckled. This is madness," he stammered. "I've been working too long in the cold. Yes, that's it. A trick of the lantern, a trick of the..." The first goblin leapt forward with sudden, startling grace. Its tiny hand plucked the lantern from the ground and held it aloft, examining Gabriel in the glow. "No trick," it said softly. "We're quite real." Its grin widened. "And we've been waiting for you." Gabriel swallowed hard. "Waiting? For me?" "Oh, yes." The goblin hopped lightly onto a gravestone, swinging the lantern with careless confidence. "You work so late. You wander these grounds alone. You brood and sneer and snarl at the joy of others." It tilted its head. "You, Gabriel Grub, are the perfect man for us to visit." The surrounding goblins erupted into chattering laughter, the sound overlapping like wind through dry branches. Gabriel raised his spade defensively. "I am a respectable man, a church servant. You have no business with me." The goblin arched an eyebrow. "Respectable?" "A servant." Its tone dripped with amusement. "Oh no, Gabriel. You serve only your own bitterness." Gabriel flinched. The goblin leaned closer, lantern light casting eerie shadows over its sharp features. "We know your heart, Gabriel Grub. We know every grudge, every scowl, every moment you have chosen your loneliness over the kindness of others." It tapped the spade with one finger, making a faint ringing sound. "And tonight, you will learn something new." Gabriel's knees wobbled. "Learn? Learn what?" The goblin's grin widened to impossible lengths. "What Christmas truly means." At this, the goblins around the graveyard began to hum, a strange, dissonant melody that slithered in and out of tune. Their small bodies swayed, snowflakes spiraled in unusual patterns around them, as if obeying their rhythm. Gabriel clutched his spade tighter, but the world itself seemed to tilt. The trees bent unnaturally, the moon blurred, and the humming grew louder, surrounding him, enveloping him, pulling him inward. The goblin held out a thin, clawed hand. "Come, Gabriel Grub. We have much to show you." Gabriel opened his mouth to protest, but the hum grew into a whirling, echoing chant, and the ground beneath him trembled. The lantern flickered wildly. Shadows thickened, and suddenly Gabriel felt himself slipping, not falling, not fainting, slipping, down, down through the snow, down through the earth, down into darkness lit by strange flickering lights. A dozen goblins dove after him, cheering with wicked delight. The graveyard vanished above him, and Gabriel Grub, the bitter sexton, was pulled into a world he had never imagined. A world waiting to teach him the lessons he had avoided all his life. Chapter 3: The Goblin's Hall. Beneath the earth, Gabriel did not remember closing his eyes. and yet darkness wrapped around him like a thick velvet curtain. He felt neither falling nor floating, but rather being carried, gently, steadily, through a space that was neither air nor earth nor dream. Strange whispers brushed against his ears. Flecks of dim light drifted past him like underwater sparks. Time stretched, softened, lost all meaning. For a moment he wondered whether he had died, but then he landed quite suddenly upon solid ground. It was not painful, just unexpected, like stepping off a stair that wasn't there. He blinked rapidly, his breath coming in short clouds as he tried to understand where he was. The place glowed, not brightly, not harshly, but with a soft, shifting luminescence that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The walls around him were stone, smooth in some places, jagged in others, alive with veins of faint green and blue light that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Overhead arched a cavernous ceiling, threaded with roots and glimmering minerals that glittered like winter stars. Gabriel's breath hitched. He was deep underground, far deeper than any grave, far deeper than any catacomb. And then he heard it. Laughter. Dozens of shrill, delighted giggles bouncing around the stone chamber like silver marbles. The goblins had arrived. They landed around him in graceful, chaotic hops, some tumbling, some spinning, some cartwheeling across the rocky floor as if gravity meant little to them. Their eyes gleamed with mischief, their limbs bent in odd angles. Their clothes, patches of leather, bark, moss, and spider silk, rustled softly as they moved. The first goblin, the one who had spoken in the graveyard, stood before Gabriel, lantern still in hand. Except the lantern now shone with a ghostly blue flame instead of warm light. "Welcome," the goblin said, sweeping into a bow, "to our humble hall." Gabriel swallowed thickly. Where am I?" The goblin grinned. "Below your world, but above the deepest roots, a space between shadows and stone, a place where goblins gather when Christmas nears." "Why?" Gabriel croaked. "To watch," the goblin said simply, "to observe the doings of mortals, to see who carries joy like a lantern, and who carries gloom like a shroud." Giggling erupted around them like rustling leaves. "Guess which you are," one goblin whispered. "Guess," another echoed, tugging playfully at Gabriel's coat hem. Gabriel stepped back instinctively, but the cavern seemed to shift with him, narrowing in some places, widening in others, as though the very stone listened and reacted to his unease. The lead goblin clapped its hands. Instantly, a long, crooked table materialized from the shadows, carved from a single twisting tree root, thick as a man's torso. Upon it lay objects that flickered and changed, a cracked mirror, a wooden box that hummed, a snow-filled globe that spun slowly without touch. The goblin gestured grandly. "We will begin the lessons now." Gabriel stiffened. "I do not need lessons from creatures such as you." A hiss rippled through the goblins. Some glared, others grinned wider, excited by the defiance. The lead goblin, however, only tilted its head. "Do you not?" it asked softly. "You are alone, Gabriel Grub." "By choice, yes, but also by fear." Gabriel opened his mouth to deny it, but the goblin raised one delicate clawed finger. "We see more than mortals think," it whispered. "We saw you look upon the village tonight. We saw the flicker in your eyes, the brief longing, before you crushed it beneath your scowl." Gabriel felt heat rise to his face. Shame, anger, embarrassment, emotions he rarely allowed himself to feel, flickered inside him. But the goblin continued, "You bury more than bodies, Gabriel. You bury memories, hopes, pieces of yourself. The cavern quieted. Even the hum of the glowing walls seemed to soften. Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. "Enough," he muttered. "Send me back." The goblin clicked its tongue. "Oh no, not yet. You will not leave until you have seen what you need to see." It tapped the humming wooden box on the table. Instantly the box unfolded, like a blooming flower of dark wood, and a thin sheet of shimmering air rose above it, forming a window made of pure light. Gabriel stared. Within the light he saw a familiar house, a small cottage, with smoke curling from the chimney. A family sat inside, a mother stirring a pot of stew, a father mending a toy horse, children laughing as they placed evergreen branches above the hearth. The goblin spoke quietly. "Do you know them?" Gabriel nodded grudgingly. "The Winters family." "Yes," the goblin said. "They prepare their Christmas feast. They have little money, little comfort, yet they laugh." Its eyes narrowed. "And you walk past their door each night, calling their singing noise." Gabriel's mouth tightened. The scene shifted. Now the projection showed a lonely cottage on the hill. A young woman sat by a window, her hands clasped, staring out at the snow. A single candle flickered beside her. Gabriel recognized her too. "Emily Ward," he muttered. "She misses her brother," the goblin said, "who died last winter. She sits alone tonight, but still she lights a candle for him, believing his spirit finds comfort in her remembrance." Gabriel felt a strange twinge. The idea of someone remembering another with love felt unfamiliar. Before he could speak, the scene changed again. This time, laughter filled the projection. The village children danced in a circle, their boots stamping patterns into the snow. One child, small with a patched coat, slipped and fell. The others helped him up, cheering, dusting snow from his sleeves. The goblin turned to Gabriel. "You growl at them for their joy. But look how they care for one another, even when they have nothing." Gabriel could not tear his eyes away. The children were poor, he knew that, but they shone with a warmth that not even winter's chill could dim. The lead goblin studied Gabriel's face carefully. "You think yourself wise, Gabriel Grub," it said, "but you know so little of warmth, of kindness, of love." Gabriel clenched his jaw. Love is a distraction, a trap for fools. The goblin's smile faded. "Is that what you tell yourself when the nights grow long, when the wind howls outside your empty window, when you stare at your cold hearth and try to convince your heart that it does not ache?" Gabriel's breath hitched. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to crush the truth beneath anger, but his throat refused to form the lie. The goblin's voice softened unexpectedly. "You have buried much, Gabriel, but we will help you uncover it." It lifted a hand, and the images dissolved like mist, replaced by swirling tendrils of light. The goblin whispered, "Now, it is time to see truth." Gabriel swallowed hard. "What truth?" The goblin stepped closer, its glowing eyes reflecting ancient wisdom. "Your own," it said, and the light expanded, enveloping Gabriel, pulling him toward memories he had long locked away. Chapter 4: Visions of a Heart Buried Deep. The light pulled Gabriel gently, not with force, but with a soft insistence, like the tide drawing sand into the sea. He felt no fear now, only a strange heaviness in his chest, as though something long dormant had begun to stir. The goblins watched with gleaming eyes, their grins fading into expressions of quiet curiosity. Even their mischief seemed hushed, as though what came next belonged to a deeper, older magic. Gabriel blinked, and the cavern dissolved. He found himself standing on a hillside, bathed in pale morning light. Snow lay untouched across the grass, sparkling like crushed glass beneath the gentle sun. Somewhere not far off, he heard the faint bleating of sheep, the tinkling of a distant bell. The air smelled of frost and pine. "This," Gabriel whispered. "I know this place." The lead goblin appeared beside him, not with a leap or a giggle this time, but slowly, almost respectfully. "Yes," it said, "you should." Gabriel's breath trembled. He knew the hill, the valley, the line of old yew trees along the path, and he knew the small house that appeared as the mist parted, whitewashed, leaning slightly, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. It was the home of his youth. He hadn't seen it in decades. A lump rose in his throat. "No," he said hoarsely, "not here." But the goblin gestured, and Gabriel had no choice but to watch. A door creaked open. A boy stepped out, thin, pale, with a mop of unruly hair and a coat far too big for him. His boots were worn, his hands were tucked into the sleeves to keep them warm, yet despite the cold, the boy's eyes sparkled with something Gabriel had long forgotten he ever possessed: hope. Gabriel stared, his breath catching painfully. That is me." The boy, young Gabriel, waded into the snow, humming to himself. He carried a wooden toy horse patched with glue and string. Its head wobbled as he trotted it through the snow, but the boy didn't mind. He laughed softly, creating tiny worlds, tiny stories in the cold air. A second figure appeared in the doorway, a woman. Her hair pulled back, her face tired but gentle, her smile warm enough to melt the snow around her feet. Gabriel's chest ached at the sight. "Mother," he whispered. She called to the boy, calling his name with affection, not scolding, not sternness, but pure, unfiltered fondness. Young Gabriel ran to her, and she lifted him, straining slightly, for the child was older now, heavier. But still she did it, pressing a kiss to his cheek, brushing snow from his hair. Gabriel had forgotten this softness, forgotten that he was once loved so openly, so freely. The goblin watched him carefully. "You remember," it murmured. Gabriel swallowed hard, unable to speak. The scene shifted. Now they stood inside the small house. The fire crackled in the hearth. The room smelled of stew and bread. A man sat at the table, broad-shouldered, with weary but kind eyes, mending clothes by candlelight. Gabriel flinched. His father. A man he had thought of rarely and never with tenderness. Young Gabriel climbed onto his father's knee, showing him the toy horse. The man laughed, a warm and rumbling laugh unlike anything Gabriel heard in his adult life, and repaired the toy with patient hands. "You remember this too," the goblin said quietly. I don't," Gabriel murmured. But he did. He remembered fragments, flashes, not enough to feel real, but now seeing them whole, it hurt, because they were gone. The scene blurred at the edges, shadows creeping in like water through cracks. The warm house flickered, became dimmer, colder. The fire faded, the laughter stilled. Gabriel's breath caught. "No," he whispered, "not this memory." The goblin said nothing. The door swung open with a gust of wind. Snow blew inside. Gabriel's mother stood in the doorway, clutching a scarf to her chest. Her voice trembled as she called for help. Behind her, on the bed, the father lay pale and unmoving, a fever having stolen him in the night. Young Gabriel sobbed, confused, terrified. Older Gabriel squeezed his eyes shut. "Enough," he begged. "Take me away from this." But the memory would not yield. It never had. He watched as the small coffin was carried down the snowy road. Watched his mother's face lose its warmth day by day. Watched himself grow quiet, withdrawn, hollow. "This was when you began to bury your heart," the goblin said softly, "before you buried anyone else." "I had no choice," Gabriel choked. "Did you not?" the goblin asked. "Or did you fear the pain of losing more?" Gabriel's jaw trembled. The scene shifted again, not to another childhood moment, but to a time years later. A young man, Gabriel in his early 20s, stood at the edge of the village. Snow fell in thick flakes around him. Before him stood a girl with kind eyes and a knitted scarf. She held his hand, pleading softly. Gabriel remembered her name, Clara. He had loved her once. She spoke words he had long forgotten. "You don't have to be alone, Gabriel. Let someone in. Let me in." Gabriel watched himself pull away, watched himself turn cold, watched himself choose solitude, because solitude could not be taken from him if he never accepted warmth in the first place. Clara's face crumpled. She stepped back slowly, and Gabriel walked away, his own chest a battlefield of fear and longing. Older Gabriel now stood frozen, breath ragged. "Why show me this?" he whispered. The goblin's voice softened further, as though it too felt the weight of the moment. "Because you forgot," it said. "You forgot that you once wanted connection. You once felt joy. You once had love and hope and dreams. And you cast them aside, not because you lacked them, but because you feared losing them." Gabriel's throat tightened painfully. The goblin looked up at him with ancient eyes. "Pain buried your heart, Gabriel Grub, and you mistook the burial for protection." Gabriel bowed his head, trembling. The visions dissolved like smoke. The cavern returned, the soft glow, the twisting stone, the circle of quiet goblins. The lead goblin stepped closer. "You see now," it said gently. "You were not born bitter. You chose it, and choices can be unmade." Gabriel wiped his eyes angrily, though no one mocked him for the tears. Even the youngest goblin regarded him not with laughter, but with solemn silence. "What? What happens next?" Gabriel asked. The goblin's smile returned, not mischievous now, but warm in a peculiar crooked way. "Next," it said, "you will see how others live with what you fear most." The cavern darkened. A new light began to form, and Gabriel braced himself for the next lesson. One he sensed would be harder still. Chapter 5. The warmth of others' darkness gathered once more, but it was not frightening. It felt soft, like a heavy blanket drawn over tired shoulders. Gabriel sensed shapes forming within it, faint outlines swirling like breath on a cold window. The goblins stood around him in a loose circle, their small faces strangely solemn, as though they understood the significance of what he was about to witness. The lead goblin raised a hand. "Now, Gabriel Grub," it said quietly, "we show you what you have always feared most, yet what others endure with grace." Gabriel swallowed, bracing himself. A gentle glow blossomed in the air before him, widening like a candle illuminating a dark room. Gradually, it sharpened into a scene, clear, warm, and alive. He saw a modest kitchen, its walls patched with mismatched boards, its shelves leaning under the weight of carefully cleaned jars. A fire crackled in the hearth, not large, but tended with care. The scent of herbs and fresh bread seemed to drift through the vision, though Gabriel knew it could not be real. At the table sat the Winters family, the very people he had passed countless times with barely a nod. Mr. Winters was stirring a pot of soup, humming a familiar tune, the same melody Gabriel had heard muffled through frosted windows on past winter nights. Mrs. Winters folded small, worn blankets, her hands moving gently despite the weariness in her eyes. Their 2 children sat near the fire, coloring shapes on scraps of paper with short, stubby pencils. They were poor, that was obvious. Their clothes were patched, their boots thin, yet their faces radiated a warmth that defied the cold creeping under the door. Mrs. Winters glanced toward the small pantry shelf. There was barely enough for one proper meal, let alone a feast. Still, she smiled. The little boy held up a drawing of a Christmas angel. "It's for you, Mama," he said softly. She drew him into her arms, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "It's perfect." Gabriel felt something pinch at his chest. The lead goblin watched him. "They struggle," it murmured, "yet they endure with love." Before Gabriel could respond, the vision dissolved and reformed into another. A candlelit room. A woman sitting by a window, her hands folded. Snow drifting outside in gentle spirals. Emily Ward. Her face was thin but peaceful, illuminated by the flicker of a single candle placed beside a wooden frame. Inside the frame was a sketch of a young man, her brother gone to an early grave. Emily whispered to the picture, though her voice was soft and steady. "Merry Christmas, Matthew. I hope you found peace. I hope you know I miss you." Her eyes shone, not with sorrow alone, but with tenderness. She lifted a tiny bell, no larger than a walnut. It jingled when she shook it, clear and pure. "Your favorite sound," she murmured, "the sound of winter mornings." She placed the bell beside the frame, folded her hands, and closed her eyes in quiet remembrance. Gabriel's throat tightened. He had buried Matthew Ward. He remembered the day. He had dug the grave with no more emotion than if he had been shoveling stones. But now, seeing Emily, he felt a heaviness he could not explain. "She suffers," the goblin said softly, "but not alone. Her sorrow is love in disguise, and she embraces it, because to feel deeply is not weakness, only humanity." The scene faded. Another appeared. Outside in the village square, the children were playing in the snow once more. But this time, Gabriel saw more than their laughter. He saw the bond between them, how they helped each other up, how they shared mittens, how they passed around a single wool hat so each could warm their ears in turn. He saw kindness blooming even in the smallest gestures. A child tied another's scarf. A girl gave her cookie to a boy who had none. 2 older children lifted a younger one to place a sprig of holly atop a wooden fence. They had little, but they had each other. The goblin spoke again. "They feel pain. They feel hunger. They feel cold, but they do not close their hearts to avoid these things. They remain open, and therefore they remain warm." Gabriel stared, mesmerized, heart aching with a strange mixture of longing and regret. The scene shifted once more, now to a place he had rarely allowed himself to look upon. The churchyard. Snow fell silently over the graves, settling like soft lace upon the stones. A woman knelt at a headstone, brushing snow from the carved name. Her breath plumed in the cold air as she whispered a prayer. Gabriel recognized the grave. He had dug it just a month earlier for her husband. But instead of cursing the heavens or collapsing in despair, the woman bowed her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes. But her voice was steady, her posture calm. "I will be all right," she whispered to the stone. "You taught me strength. I carry it still." She pressed her hand to the stone as if touching the memory of the man she had loved. And Gabriel felt something deep within him stir, something sharp and raw. "Why show me this?" he asked, voice cracking. "They suffer, all of them. They endure so much." "That is precisely why," the goblin answered. "They endure, and yet they still choose light. They still choose kindness. They still choose to feel, even when feeling hurts." The cavern dimmed again, the visions retreating like ebbing waves. Gabriel turned away, covering his eyes with a shaking hand. "All my life," he whispered, "I thought I was wise to avoid pain. I thought shutting out the world would protect me." He drew a ragged breath, but it only made me cold. The goblin nodded slowly. "Yes." Gabriel lowered his hand, tears glistening in his beard. "I thought joy was fragile," he said, "that if I let it in, it would slip away, leaving me empty." "It may slip away," the goblin said, "but it returns again and again if you let it. That is the nature of joy. It cannot be chained, but it always finds the heart that welcomes it." Gabriel looked at the goblin, a question trembling on his lips. "Is it too late?" he asked softly. "Too late to change?" The goblin stepped forward. Its small hand, rough and clawed but strangely gentle, rested against Gabriel's sleeve. "No," it said, "it is never too late for a heart to thaw." The moment held quietly, like snow falling on a still pond. Then the goblin stepped back, raising its voice so it echoed through the cavern. "One final lesson remains, Gabriel Grub." Gabriel straightened himself, breathing slowly, deeply. "What must I see now?" The goblin's eyes gleamed, not with mischief, but with a deep, knowing warmth. "You must see," it said, "what your life could become if you choose to change." The cavern brightened, light swelling like dawn. Gabriel closed his eyes, and the final vision began. Chapter 6, A New Dawn for Gabriel Grub. Light washed over Gabriel like warm water, gentle and steady, carrying him into a vision that felt both real and dreamlike. He sensed the goblins around him, quiet now, almost reverent, as though even they understood the importance of what he was about to see. The brightness softened, faded, reshaped itself. And suddenly, Gabriel stood in the village square, but not the village square he knew. This one shimmered with a quiet radiance, as though dusted with golden frost. Snow fell in slow, graceful spirals, each flake glowing faintly before disappearing against the cobblestones. Lanterns flickered warmly in the windows. The scent of cinnamon, wood smoke, and fresh pine drifted through the crisp air. Gabriel looked around, confused. "What is this place?" he whispered. The lead goblin appeared beside him, not laughing, not grinning, but wearing a soft, knowing expression. "This," it said, "is your village as it might one day be." Gabriel's gaze flicked to the people walking through the square. There were familiar faces, villagers he had known for years. But something was different. They smiled at him, not with wariness, not with pity, but with genuine warmth. A young boy waved, "Good morning, Mr. Grub." Gabriel blinked. A woman carrying a basket of apples stopped beside him. "Cold day, isn't it?" she said. "Don't forget to warm yourself by the bakery. He keeps a pot of cider for passers-by." Gabriel stared, unsure how to respond. These people who once regarded him with unease, now treated him as if he were welcome, as if he belonged. Another scene formed beside the first, overlaying it like a second layer of frost. Gabriel saw himself, older but not hunched, still weathered, but with a lighter expression. He wore his usual coat, but it seemed less burdened, his shoulders less tense. He stood beside the churchyard gate, repairing a broken lamp-post while humming softly. Children ran to him, not out of mischief, but because they liked him. "Mr. Grub, will you help us build a snow fort? Can you show us how to make a proper snowman?" He laughed, a sound Gabriel had almost forgotten he was capable of. Not a bitter bark, but a genuine laugh. Gabriel stared at the scene, breath trembling. "This can't be me." "It can," the goblin said, "if you choose it." The images blurred, shifting into something new. Now he saw a winter evening. Snow glimmered under moonlight. A group of villagers gathered around the church steps, lighting lanterns. At their center stood the future Gabriel, holding a small bundle of holly and ribbon. He was decorating the church for Christmas Eve. A woman approached him, Emily Ward, and handed him a candle. She smiled gently. "Thank you, Mr. Grub," she said. "It means a great deal to everyone that you help." He nodded, returning the smile, small but sincere. Gabriel's eyes stung. He had never imagined himself part of anything. Not a celebration, not a gathering, not a community. Another vision unfurled. Inside a small cottage, his cottage, Gabriel sat at a wooden table. The fire crackled. A teapot steamed gently. He carved a small wooden toy horse, smoothing the edges with careful hands. On the wall, a simple wreath hung, pine branches and dried berries. Someone knocked at the door. Gabriel, future Gabriel, opened it to find the winter's children, shy but hopeful. "Mama says thank you," the girl said, holding out a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, "for bringing us extra firewood." Future Gabriel accepted it, touched. "You're welcome. Stay warm now." The two children scampered away, laughing into the snow. Gabriel felt his throat tighten, his eyes burned. He had always feared kindness, giving it, receiving it, because both made him vulnerable. But here, in this vision, he saw the truth. Kindness did not make a person weaker, it made them whole. The scene softened like dimming embers. The lead goblin turned to him. "You see, Gabriel Grub," it said gently, "your future is not written in your bitterness. It is written in your choices." The cavern began to return. The glowing walls, the twisted roots, the watchful goblin eyes. Gabriel blinked as the last traces of the vision faded. He drew a slow, shaking breath. "I want that future," he whispered. The words felt fragile, like new leaves, but they were real. I want to change." The goblin's face broke into a tender, crooked smile. "Then rise, Gabriel Grub. Rise with the morning, and choose." The cavern brightened until Gabriel felt weightless, as if lifted by the warm breath of dawn itself. The goblins gathered around him, their humming soft and melodic now, like a lullaby echoing through stone. "Good Christmas to you," the lead goblin murmured, "and good life." Everything dissolved. Gabriel gasped. He found himself lying in the churchyard, the grey-blue light of early morning spilling across the snow. His lantern was beside him, its flame gently sputtering. His spade lay where he had dropped it. Frost glimmered on the stones. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream. But then he felt it. A warmth inside him, soft and unexpected. He rose slowly, brushing snow from his coat. The air was crisp and full of quiet. From the village below came the faint sound of laughter, chiming bells, and a distant church organ welcoming Christmas Day. Gabriel took one step, then another. His boots crunched softly through the snow as he walked toward the village. Not with his usual grim purpose, but with something new inside him. Something fragile, yet determined. Hope. He reached the main street just as a family opened their shutters. The winter's children spotted him and waved eagerly. "Mr. Grub, Merry Christmas." Gabriel hesitated, but then, slowly, he lifted his hand and waved back. "Good morning," he called, voice rough with emotion. "A very Merry Christmas to you." As he walked on, something else happened. People smiled at him, and for the first time in many, many years, Gabriel Grub smiled back.